So one of the practices that I'm most passionate about is something called soul retrieval. And this is something that I particularly love because it's so profoundly effective for helping people to have a different foundation and a different life experience after a single session. And through all my looking at all the different things in the metaphysical community, there's not very much that I've come across that reliably has that effect. And the underlying premise of soul retrieval is it's something that's found in cultures throughout the world. So it definitely falls under the category of core shamanism. And within that, we find that when people go through traumatic events, it could be a death in the family, it could be an accident, all sorts of different things. It could be teasing or bullying on the playground for a sensitive child. So any of these things, one of the ways that human beings deal really effectively with this is what psychologists would talk about as dissociation. Part of your awareness or consciousness leaves and goes somewhere else. The shamanic term for this same phenomenon is soul loss, and the idea is that it protects the essence. So if you're going to be in a car accident, or if you're in an abusive relationship, or you have abusive parents, the last place you really want to be is fully in the experience. And regardless of what happens in the course of our human life, our soul is going to endure past that. So at some point we'll leave the body and we'll reintegrate with our higher self. And so the part of our really strong underlying intent is to keep our soul safe and protected from trauma and harm. And that's where this process of dissociation or soul loss comes in. So its underlying intent is to be very protective and to really support us. The trouble is that that piece of our essence or our energy or our soul doesn't always return naturally on its own. Sometimes it does, but sometimes, particularly if the trauma is chronic, or I work with a lot of people who have an underlying ambivalence about really being here. There's a feeling of life is really hard, and sometimes I just feel tired and overwhelmed and kind of homesick to be back in spirit. And while I can really understand that, it tends to promote soul loss, or at the very least those pieces not returning when they leave due to a car accident or something. So in the process of soul retrieval, I get to go in and gather up all of those pieces from where they are out floating in shamanic reality and bring them back to my client and blow them in. And I do this in person and from a distance. It's absolutely equally effective either way, so it's complete personal preference and what's more convenient for whether you do a phone session or an in-person session or even an email session. I've had folks that I've worked with in China, for example, and it's hard to get the timing to sync up, so we've done work via email. And in the course of this session of gathering those parts back, it creates a lot of changes for people. So a lot of people suffer from like a low level of depression. They're not severely depressed, and some of my clients are severely depressed, but a lot of people have this experience of just the world's kind of gray. There are no real highs, there are no real lows. They may have memory loss of I don't remember a lot of my childhood. I don't think anything bad happened, but I just don't have a lot of memories. Or they may have more severe kinds of anxiety or different responses. And so in gathering these parts up for people and returning them and getting their core essence back, they have the opportunity to be really solid and really resourced in themselves. And for some people it's really subtle, but what I see pretty universally with all of my clients is that anything that comes up that could be a challenge, if you've had a soul retrieval and you have your essence back, is just a little bit easier to deal with. So unexpected news, death in the family, all the challenges that we go through that's just part of the business of being human, you just have a stronger foundation, you just have more resources to deal with. And I love it because I can work with someone one time and have that effect. Now, if you've done research on the web or you know a fair bit about shamanism, you'll know that there are a lot of different approaches to soul retrieval. The one that I take is very much, let's get it all done in a single session. So you might go to one practitioner and they would do a deep healing around bringing back one soul part. And that's fine, I'm not criticizing that. I'm just wanting to differentiate so that if you choose to work with me, you have a clear idea of how I work. My approach is to gather up all the soul parts and pull them back in, everything that's available to come back. So I'll get parts back from childhood, I'll get parts back from previous relationships, and gather those all up and put them in. In addition to that, I combine a shamanic healing with the soul retrieval session because while soul loss is something that's never good for anyone, sometimes it's not the biggest underlying cause of whatever symptom my client is presenting with. So when you go into the realm of shamanic healing, there's so many different things that we can do to help people to have a better life experience. We do cool things like, clearing illness before it can ever manifest in physical form. Or if it does, we can extract the spiritual aspect of the illness and make it far more likely to respond to conventional treatment. We can work with destiny paths to really strengthen, a direction that you really want to go and really support you in that. I see a lot of my clients profoundly affected by what's happened to them in other lifetimes. So I end up working with a lot of people who have had a number of incarnations. And if you don't believe in past lives, that's okay. I treat shamanism as a framework for understanding the unseen world, and past lives are a useful part of that framework, but it doesn't mean that that's necessarily the overall truth of things. But I see these stories that are attached to people's souls. Maybe they had everybody that they loved die in the plague, and so an animal passes, and while they're heartbroken, the heartbreak goes on for perhaps years of just deep, painful grieving about this. And they're really working to release something that happened when they lost everybody that they loved in one fell swoop in this plague experience, and they just didn't have the wherewithal to resolve it then. And so it's something that their soul has carried, and so as they mourn and mourn, they're working to be free of it. And for me, that's just not a very joyful process. And so I'm very much about efficiency and effectiveness. I have a degree in mechanical engineering, and I worked as an engineer for a number of years. So I'm all about how can we more efficiently help people to be in the sweet spot of life, having the things they want, able to manifest the things they want. And going in directly and doing shamanic healing on something like that can completely release the energy, allowing my client to be free of them. So they don't have to keep processing and they don't have to keep working with that. They can move on to whatever it is that they want to create in their lives. So there are a number of different techniques and modalities that I work with. I'm definitely in the category of a shamanic geek, so I study a lot of different things and I pull a lot of different things together. And I work really deeply with my guides. They're always showing me new things and how to work with things. One of the things that's been coming up a lot lately in the work that I've done has been getting better interface between my clients and the world. So it's not that the world is wrong, but there are a lot of souls that are incarnating that carry some very unique, very amazing vibration, but it's different than the vibration that the bulk of humanity is carrying. And they're coming in actually with a service of saying, hey, I want to give this energy to the world, I want to make it available. But when you actually get into your daily, holding down a 9-to-5 job and trying to drive through traffic and all of those kind of daily task things, it can be really hard. A lot of things can be lost in translation. So if you've ever had the experience of saying, I thought I communicated that so clearly, I was coming from this clear place, I said it very clearly, and I got completely misinterpreted, and that happens to me a lot. It may not be anything that's wrong with you, and it may not be anything that's wrong with the other people. It may just be that there's some adjustments that are needed in your energy field to sort of put in a translator so that your energy and your expression can be better understood by the people around you. So there's just a host of things that I can work with. The initial session that I work with people in is the soul retrieval and shamanic healing, and that's a very in-depth session. It's about an hour and a half, and I get to do a whole bunch of things. So I'll connect you to a star being, I'll bring in a couple of power animals, I'll bring back all of your soul parts, I'll check out your auric field and see if there are rips and tears that need, that need work. If you have relationships that need to be cleaned up in terms of the cords, I do that as part of it. So there's just a tremendous amount of healing that takes place in this single session. And then if you want to continue to work with me, I find that it's kind of like the onion, there are always other layers. So that healing stands alone, or I have available shamanic healing sessions for people who've gone through this initial session that are available. So the information's here on my website, and thank you so much for taking your time to listen to this.